Hey guys, what's going on? So in this video, we'll be learning about closures. Now closures are function objects that can remember values outside their enclosing scopes and can be used within that function. Now as always, definition at the beginning always feel weird and difficult to sink in. We will exactly cover what is a closure in this video, but to understand this concept fairly quickly and clearly, you should know how functions in Python act like first class functions. I already have a video on this, so feel free to watch it if not already. The link to it is provided in the description below, or you can click on the card which appears at the top right corner. Okay, so now another prerequisite is to understand how functions can be nested. So let's start with this topic first. Now as you can see that on the screen that I already have a function named calculation which takes a number as an argument and returns the number. So if I go ahead and run it, nothing much, it just prints me directly the value that I passed. Now let's go ahead and nest a function inside this function and see how that turns out. Okay, so let me go ahead and define another function. Define double, which takes an argument number, and inside it, let's go ahead and return the twice of that number. So return 2 into number. Okay, so let me go ahead and remove this number. And before coming out of the calculation, let's return the double with the number. All right, let me explain this. So we have a calculation function with an argument number, and inside the calculation function, we have nested another function, which is double, which takes in another argument number and returns twice of the number which we pass inside this argument. Now, before returning from the main parent or enclosing function, we actually returned the result of this double function. So we actually over here executed this double function, so it actually returns us the twice of the number, and this number is actually the number that we passed over here, and that number is 10. Now if I go ahead and run it, it should print me the answer 20. That's because while returning from this calculation function, it calls and executes this double function, and the parameter passed inside is the number 10, and this function returns us the twice of the number that we passed, and which returns 20, and that value gets reflected over here, and it finally returns us the value 20. So if I go ahead and run it, it prints me the value 20. Now one thing to note is that we can have multiple functions nested inside, but then you would have to use multiple return statements. To show you, let me go ahead and grab that piece of code and let me paste it. All right, so let me clear the screen and explain what exactly I have written here. Cool. So right now, instead of printing simple calculation 10, we are actually taking 10 and we are passing another parameter, which is d, and up inside we are having two nested functions, double and triple. Double doubles the value, triple triples the value. Now as I told you that if you are using multiple functions, you have to use multiple return statements. Now to execute that, I put a condition that if x, which is the string that we pass from here, is equal to d, it will double the number. Otherwise, if you pass any other thing, it will triple the number. So in the first case, when I run this, it will actually double the number because x is d. If I pass anything else, say 2 or any other stuff, it will print me 30. It will execute the triple function and return me 30. Now that's all about the basic overview on nesting of functions. Now let's talk about closures. So as told earlier, closures are Python function objects that remember the values provided by provided in the enclosing scope. To show you, let me go ahead and first of all remove these functions and codes. Okay, now what exactly do I mean by values in enclosing scope? The enclosing function is the calculation here, and what all variables and values, including these parameters over here, you declare inside this calculation function becomes the values inside this enclosing scope for the functions that we nest inside. So let me go ahead and declare a variable, say y equals 15, and now let me declare another variable below this function. So let me come over here and z equals to 20. Now these variables y, z, number, and x become the variables in the enclosing scope of the double function. Now keeping all this in mind, let's see closure in action. So let me go ahead and delete all the arguments of the double function. So let me delete this. Oh, and actually we didn't return it, right? So let me return the double. So earlier we wrote something like double number. So in this case, let me go ahead and delete this number as well. So as you can see, I haven't provided any argument with double. Oh, and let me go ahead and delete this because we haven't provided any argument yet. And let me return 2 times the number, and let me clear the screen. Now if I go ahead and run it, you would expect it to throw some sort of error because the number here, we haven't passed it inside as the argument. But if I run it, to your surprise, it won't throw me any error. Surprisingly, you would infer that the double function somehow tend to remember the value of its parent enclosing function, which is this calculation. This property is called closure. To make it more clear, let me return all the values, that is y is the number and x. So let me, okay, so number is already returned, so let me remove this 2 in 2. Let me return number, x, y, and z. If I go ahead and run it, you notice that all the values are printed now. The number is 10, x is 2, y is 15, and z is 20. And no matter z is up or down, regardless of its position, if it's inside the scope of calculation function, it can be automatically used inside the double function without even being passed as the parameter or the argument. Now the same property can be observed in multiple functions as well. Okay, and last thing is that if you want to pass an argument exclusive to that double function, you can do that by simply coming over here, and before returning, let me pass something like 20, I guess. No, 20 is already there. Say, let me pass a string, say param or parameter, and inside it, let me command receive that values by saying say p, and let me print that p as well. If I go ahead and run it, you would notice that the param string also got returned. Now we can use that value however we require. Okay, so alright guys, that's all for this video. I hope you really understood about what exactly closures are, and this closure property is really important in several designing patterns like the factory method and in object-oriented programming. Also, this closure property is required if you want to understand what exactly a decorator is. So that's gonna do it for this video. If you really like this video, there are a couple of ways you can support us. The easiest and the simplest way is to simply like the video and subscribe to the channel. And you can also support us by spreading the word to others who really want to learn more about Python and other related tech stacks. This will not only help our channel to grow, but we will be gladly able to help them as well. Alright guys, see you in the next lecture.